The galaxy of Aurealis was filled with many kinds of intelligent life, but among them the Volari were known as one of the most advanced and proud civilizations. They were tall, elegant, and had skin that shimmered faintly under light. Their technology could move mountains, and their cities floated above oceans made of silver mist. But their culture was strange to outsiders, because the Volari were ruled only by females. For centuries, the Volari believed that males were weak, violent, and foolish. Long ago, their history told of a war started by male Volari who sought power. Since then, the ruling council had removed all males from leadership, education, and even conversation. Male Volari were rare now, kept away on distant colonies, almost forgotten. The belief spread that males of any species were dangerous and unworthy of trust. Among those who believed this most strongly was Commander Sierra Venar. She was young for a Volari officer, only 90 years by her people's years, but already known as fierce and intelligent. She led the exploration cruiser Vareth, which patrolled uncharted space near human territories. Her loyalty to the Volari Council was absolute, and her hatred of males was deep. She saw them as the reason her people once suffered chaos. When her ship received a signal from a dying human vessel, Syra's first instinct was to ignore it. "A male's distress signal," her sensor officer reported, her tone sharp with disdain. "A human male, most likely." Syra crossed her arms and looked at the holographic image of the damaged ship. "Ignore it," she said coldly. "Human males bring nothing but trouble. Let the void take him." But then another officer, a young cadet named Leon, spoke hesitantly. "Commander, the signal code includes a medical emergency. And the coordinates are close. The laws of exploration command assistance even to other species." Syra glared at her. "Do you question my command?" Leon lowered her eyes. "No, Commander, but we could at least see if there are survivors. The Council would not want us to appear cruel." For a long moment, Syra said nothing. She had been taught to despise males, but she was also trained to obey the code of exploration. Finally, she gave a cold sigh. "Fine, one scan. If he lives, we rescue him, but he will be kept under watch." The Vareth approached the human ship, a small burned freighter floating near an asteroid field. Its engines were dead and the hull was torn apart. Inside, scanners found only one living being, a human male unconscious, surrounded by smoke and debris. When the rescue team brought him aboard, Syra stood in the medical bay, arms behind her back. The human lay on a recovery bed covered in scars and bruises. He was tall by Volari standards, his skin tanned and his hair dark. The medical officer, Dr. Kalira, checked his vitals. "He's stable. His ship was hit by pirate fire. No weapons found on him." Syra's silver eyes narrowed. "Humans always find ways to hide violence." But then the human stirred, groaning softly. His eyes opened, green, bright, confused. Where am I?" he whispered. "You are aboard the Volari ship Vareth," Syra said flatly. "You were found drifting in space. I am Commander Sierra Venar." The man blinked, trying to sit up, but Kalira stopped him gently. "Rest, human. You are safe for now." "Safe," he repeated weakly, then gave a small smile. "Didn't expect aliens to rescue me today." He turned his head toward Sierra. "Thanks, Commander." The word thanks caught her off guard. It was simple but sincere. She had expected arrogance or fear, not gratitude. She frowned. "Do not thank me. I acted by duty, not compassion." He smiled faintly again. "Still counts, doesn't it?" Sierra said nothing. She left the room, her long coat flowing behind her, pretending she didn't hear the small laugh he gave before the doors closed. In the following days, the human recovered slowly. His name was Elias Carter, a cargo pilot from Earth. He had been attacked by raiders while delivering supplies to a nearby colony. He spoke politely to everyone, even to those who ignored him. He asked questions about Volari culture, their ship and their technology, but always with curiosity, not arrogance. Syra, however, kept her distance. She didn't trust him. She ordered guards to follow him wherever he went. She even had his quarters locked from the outside. Yet something about him bothered her, not because of fear, but because he did not behave like the males she was taught to hate. One day, while inspecting the ship's engines, Syra found Elias helping a maintenance team. He was holding a small tool trying to understand the alien machinery. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Elias looked up, startled. "Helping. Your engineer said she was short on hands, so I offered." Syra's voice turned sharp. "You touch Volari equipment without permission?" He raised his hands calmly. "Just passing tools, Commander. I like learning how things work." The engineer beside him, a quiet Valeri named Theri, spoke up softly. "He only watched and helped when asked, Commander." "He did not harm anything." Syra's expression tightened, but she said nothing more. She walked away, her mind uneasy. Why was he trying to help? What did he gain from this? That night, Syra sat in her quarters, staring at a holographic screen showing Earth. She had read about humans before, about their wars, their mistakes, their history. In many ways, they were like the Valeri of the past, divided, proud, often violent. Yet they were also known for something else, resilience. Humans had survived everything from plagues to planetary disasters. That thought unsettled her. The next day, disaster struck. While exploring a nearby nebula, the Varith was suddenly caught in a gravity storm, an unpredictable space phenomenon that twisted ships apart. The control room filled with alarms, engines failing, shouted the helmswoman. "The gravity well is pulling us in." Syra stood firm. "Stabilize the core. Redirect power to the thrusters." But the ship shook violently, throwing officers from their seats. Sparks flew from the ceiling. In the chaos, Elias, who had been in the engineering bay, heard the call over the ship's speakers and ran toward the main control room. When he arrived, the crew stared. A human male running onto their command deck was almost unthinkable. "Get out," one officer shouted. "You are not allowed here." But Elias ignored her. He saw the flickering control panels, the readings showing energy overload. "Your core regulators are overheating. You need to reroute through the secondary coil." Syra turned sharply. "You dare give orders here?" "I'm not giving orders, I'm trying to keep you alive," he shouted back, pointing to the screen. "Look, your core output is climbing." "You've got 30 seconds before it breaches." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Syra saw it. He was right. The readings matched his words. She hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. "Do it! Follow his instructions!" The crew moved fast, obeying her. Elias jumped to another console, typing quickly. The ship groaned as power surged through new conduits, and then slowly the shaking stopped. The alarms faded. The Varith steadied. The control room went silent except for the soft hum of systems returning to normal. Elias leaned against a console, breathing heavily. "There, not so bad." Syra stared at him for a long time. Her silver eyes softened just slightly. "You saved my ship." He smiled tiredly. "I figured you'd be mad if I didn't." For the first time, she almost smiled, not out of amusement but out of quiet respect. Later, when she wrote her report to the Valeri Council, Syra hesitated over one sentence. According to tradition, she should have credited only her officers, but she didn't. She wrote, "Assistance was provided by a human male named Elias Carter, whose quick actions prevented total destruction." That night, she looked out through her window into the stars. Her world had always been simple. Males were weak, unworthy, dangerous. But now one man had risked his life for her crew without asking for reward. It made her wonder, had her people been wrong all along? As the ship continued its journey through the quiet stars, Syra found herself thinking about the human more than she wanted to admit. He was still strange, still unpredictable, but for the first time in her long life, she didn't see a male as a threat. She saw him as something different, something worth understanding. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a bond that would challenge everything she had been taught to believe. The Varith traveled farther into unexplored space, its engines humming steadily. Commander Syra Venar could not shake the thought of Elias Carter from her mind. She tried to focus on her duties, overseeing crew assignments, inspecting cargo, and reviewing star maps. But every time she glanced at the recovered human, a part of her mind insisted he was more than just a survivor. Elias, meanwhile, adapted quickly to life aboard the Valeri ship. The crew was wary at first. They whispered about his presence in the hallways, speculated about his motives, and sometimes deliberately avoided him. But he treated everyone politely, never raising his voice or showing fear. He helped engineers solve minor mechanical problems, assisted the medical officer in organizing supplies, and even spent time learning basic Valeri customs, gestures, and words. Syra noticed all of this. At first, it irritated her. Why was a male so competent? Why did he earn respect without demanding it? She had spent centuries believing men were inherently inferior. and this human challenged that belief in ways she did not want to acknowledge. One day, while the ship drifted near a colorful nebula, Elias approached her. He held a small tablet device that showed star formations and charts. "Commander," he said politely, "I was looking at the nebula patterns. Your sensors picked up something unusual, a cluster of small asteroids moving in formation. It might be hiding something." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And why should I care about your observations?" "Because," he said calmly, "you might fly right into them if you don't adjust your trajectory." "I only want to help." Sarah's silver eyes narrowed. She wanted to dismiss him, but there was truth in his words. She checked her instruments and found the asteroids exactly as he said. "Fine," she said shortly, "you were correct. We will adjust course." Elias nodded and smiled faintly. "Thank you, Commander." That small acknowledgement irritated her more than she wanted to admit. Why did his manners bother her? She spent a long moment staring at him before she finally turned away. Days passed, and the Vareth's journey grew more dangerous. The nebula they were exploring was unstable, with magnetic storms and drifting ice comets. The crew had to be alert constantly, and many officers grew nervous. But Elias remained steady, calm, and focused. Whenever alarms rang, he would appear near consoles offering advice or assistance, always practical, never commanding. Sarah observed him silently, often from a distance. She found herself comparing his calm logic to the impulsive, sometimes reckless males she had studied in Valari history. Unlike the men she had read about, Elias never sought to dominate, never assumed he was superior. He simply acted where action was needed. Then one evening, a distress call came from a human colony on a nearby planet. The message was brief and urgent. The colony was under attack by raiders. Their defenses were failing and their communications were being jammed. Sarah convened her senior officers. "We can respond," she said. "We are close enough to assist, but the Council will question why we intervene in human affairs." Elias spoke quietly. "If we can help them, we should. Lives are at stake." Sarah's first reaction was annoyance. He had no authority here. But the sincerity in his voice struck her. She hesitated, then made the decision. "Prepare a landing party. I will lead it. And," she added reluctantly, "Elias, you will accompany us." The landing party descended to the colony in sleek transport pods. When they arrived, chaos reigned. Buildings were damaged, fires burned, and panicked civilians ran in every direction. Raiders moved like shadows, striking quickly and disappearing just as fast. Elias immediately jumped into action. He helped organize civilians, directing them to shelters and medical stations. He assisted the Valari soldiers in securing entrances, explaining human layouts and tactics with surprising clarity. His understanding of human psychology, how people panic, how to calm them, was invaluable. Sarah watched him from a distance, her mind racing. She had expected incompetence or at least nervousness from him. Instead, he was brave, clever, and calm. He did not shout orders. He guided with quiet authority. Slowly, she realized she was starting to trust him, and that realization confused her more than anything else. During a lull in the fighting, Sarah approached Elias. Smoke rose in the background, and the air smelled of scorched metal. "You are remarkably effective," she said bluntly. Elias shrugged modestly. "I just do what I can. People need help. That's all." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to argue, to tell him that males were untrustworthy by nature. But the evidence before her eyes contradicted every lesson she had learned. The battle resumed, and the team faced the raiders in an abandoned warehouse. The attackers were armed with blasters and improvised explosives. Valari weapons were superior, but the raiders were cunning and used humans as shields. Sarah led the charge, her plasma blade cutting through the confusion. Elias followed closely, using his knowledge of human architecture to predict enemy movements. He guided civilians to safety, distracted raiders when needed, and even disarmed a small explosive before it could detonate. At one point, Sarah found herself cornered by 2 raiders. She moved with precision, but one of the attackers raised a weapon at her back. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward and tackled the man aside. Sarah glanced back in surprise. "Stay out of my way," she snapped. "I won't," he replied calmly, standing and brushing himself off. "But I also won't let you get hurt." She said nothing, focusing on the other attacker, but his words lingered in her mind. No male she had known would act like that without expectation of reward or glory. He simply did it because it was right. By the end of the battle, the raiders were either captured or fled. The colony suffered minimal casualties, thanks largely to Elias's quick thinking and calm leadership. Civilians thanked him repeatedly, some even bowing slightly in the Valari way. Sira, however, remained silent. She was struggling with feelings she did not understand. Respect, yes, but there was also something else, a grudging admiration that unsettled her pride. After returning to the Vareth, Sira called Elias to her quarters. The room was quiet, illuminated by soft starlight through a panoramic window. "You performed well," she said simply. Elias smiled faintly. "Thank you, Commander. I only did what I could." Sira crossed her arms, pacing slowly. "You are not like any male I have ever known. You think, you plan, you act without selfishness, you help others without seeking reward." He looked at her carefully. "I think everyone should try to do that. You helped me once when I was in trouble. I only returned the favor. That is how life works." Sira felt a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she had never associated with males. It was not trust, not exactly. It was something new, a recognition that he was different, special, perhaps even admirable. She clenched her fists slightly to control the rising emotion. Over the next days, Sira observed him more closely. He learned the Valari language quickly, not just words but subtle expressions and gestures. He engaged with the crew, earning their trust without demanding it. Even the skeptical officers began to speak of him quietly with respect. Sira could not deny it any longer. This human was exceptional, and with that realization came a new and dangerous thought. If he could challenge everything she had been taught about males, what else could he challenge? Late one night, she found herself walking the observation deck, staring at the stars. Elias was there, studying a star map projected in the deck's air interface. "You should rest," she said quietly. He looked up and smiled. "I am fine, Commander. I like to watch the stars. They make you feel small and alive." Sira nodded slowly, leaning against the rail. "They do. They also remind you that there is more in the universe than we can control." He glanced at her, reading the emotions she tried to hide. "You think too much sometimes, Commander." "I have a duty," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "Duty is more important than thought." "Sometimes duty doesn't prevent learning," he said softly. "Sometimes duty means you see the truth even if it surprises you." Sira stared at him. Those words, they cut deeper than she expected. He was right. He always was. And slowly a thought formed in her mind. Perhaps males were not all dangerous. Perhaps some could be allies. Perhaps some could even inspire trust or something more. The Vareth continued its journey, moving farther into uncharted space. Every day brought new discoveries, strange planets, ancient ruins, signals from unknown civilizations. And with every challenge, Elias proved himself capable, dependable, and brave. Sira could no longer deny it. This human was not only alive, but exceptional. He forced her to question centuries of belief, to face doubts she had never allowed herself. And while she fought against her feelings, she could not ignore the truth. Elias Carter had changed her world, and she knew, somewhere deep inside, that nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time in her life, Sira wondered if she had judged all males unfairly, and more frighteningly, she wondered if this one human could teach her what no Valari history or law ever had, that courage, honor, and wisdom were not bound to gender at all. The stars outside the Vareth glimmered like cold diamonds. Commander Sira Venner stood quietly at the observation deck, her mind lost in thoughts she never imagined she would have. It had been several weeks since Elias Carter joined their mission, and in that time, everything she believed about males had begun to change. The Valari crew had grown used to the human now. He was still different, still alien to their ways, but he had earned a strange kind of respect that none of them could deny. He was not loud, not arrogant, not demanding. He listened, learned, and acted when needed. Even the strictest officers now greeted him with quiet nods. Sira found herself observing him more than she should. She told herself it was duty, that she was only watching to ensure he did not cause trouble. But deep inside she knew that was not true. She was fascinated by his calm strength, his ability to see good where she only saw danger, and his kindness that felt disarming. One morning, as the Vareth moved through a region of dark space, the sensors detected something unusual. A massive derelict ship drifting without power. Its surface was scarred, ancient, covered in strange runes that none of the crew could identify. Syra called a meeting in the command chamber. "We will investigate. This could be a lost vessel from an older civilization. Prepare an exploration team." Dr. Kalira frowned slightly. "Commander, the energy readings are strange. There may be danger inside." Syra nodded. "I am aware. That is why we will proceed carefully." Elias, standing near the edge of the room, spoke softly. "If you're going, I'm coming too. I have experience with human ruins and in traps." Several officers turned toward him with surprise. Syra hesitated, her instincts warning her not to allow it. But something in his tone, calm and steady, had made her pause. "Very well," she said finally. "But you will follow my orders exactly." Elias gave a respectful nod. "Understood, Commander." They boarded a small shuttle and approached the derelict ship. As they entered its dark hull, flashlights revealed long corridors covered in metallic dust and strange glowing symbols. The air was still, heavy with silence and mystery. "This ship is old," Elias said, brushing a hand along a wall. "Centuries old, maybe more." Kalira scanned the surroundings. No life signs, but there's residual power deep inside. Something is still active. They moved carefully, step by step, deeper into the vessel. The deeper they went, the more uneasy the Valari crew became. The symbols began to glow faintly as they passed, reacting to their movement. Suddenly, a loud hum echoed through the corridors and the floor trembled. Energy flowed through the walls. Lights flickered on, one by one, until the entire hall was bathed in eerie blue light. "Something's awake," Elias said quietly. A voice filled the air, not spoken, but felt like a vibration in their minds. "Intruders? Foreign life detected." Syra raised her weapon. "Defensive positions." Panels on the walls opened, revealing hovering drones, ancient machines still functional. They glowed with red light and began to move toward them. "Fall back," Syra ordered. Blasts of energy filled the corridor. The Valari fired with precision, but there were too many drones. Elias grabbed a fallen shield from one of them and used it to block the incoming fire, protecting 2 officers who had fallen behind. "Left corridor," he shouted. "There's an opening!" Syra followed his direction, and they moved through a narrow passage, escaping the main attack. When they finally reached a sealed chamber, the door closed automatically behind them. The room went quiet again. Everyone breathed heavily, trying to recover. Syra turned to Elias, her voice firm. "You saved my officers again." Elias shook his head. "They saved me first when they covered our retreat. We're a team." The word team echoed in her mind. Valari culture rarely used that word with males. But somehow, when he said it, it felt right. In the center of the chamber, they found a massive crystal structure connected to wires and conduits. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Kalira whispered, "This could be the ship's core. Or its memory." Elias stepped closer, studying it. "It's old, but it's still alive. Maybe it's an AI, like a guardian." The crystal glowed brighter as if responding to his words. A holographic figure appeared, tall, glowing, and ancient. It spoke in a voice that filled the room. "I am Keeper of the Ark. You disturb forbidden ground." Syra raised her chin. "We mean no harm. We seek knowledge." The hologram turned its gaze toward Elias. "You carry the light of humanity. The last time your kind walked these halls, the stars burned." Elias frowned. "I don't know what you mean. My kind didn't build this." "Perhaps not," the Keeper said. "But you are linked by memory and blood. The makers of this ship feared your kind. They believed humans would destroy what they could not understand." Syra felt her heart tighten. The AI's words echoed her own past beliefs, her own fear and prejudice toward males. She looked at Elias, expecting anger, but he only sighed softly. "Maybe they were right once," he said. "But people change. We learn." The AI seemed to study him for a long moment. Then the room's lights dimmed and the hologram spoke again, softer this time. "Perhaps. Then prove it." Suddenly, the ship's systems flared to life again. Energy surged through the walls and the temperature began to rise rapidly. The AI's voice echoed, "You must stabilize the core or all will perish." Syra moved instantly. "Kalira, monitor the readings." "Elias, with me." They ran to the control station, trying to override the system. The ancient controls were complex and alien. Symbols shifted across the panels, impossible to read. Elias studied them quickly. his eyes scanning the glowing symbols. Wait, these patterns are similar to old human encryption codes. Maybe I can read them by pattern recognition. Syra glanced at him, surprised. You can do that? He smiled faintly. I can try. As he worked, she watched his hands move quickly across the holographic controls. He was calm even as the walls trembled around them. She found herself admiring that calm, the quiet confidence that steadied everyone around him. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, Elias shouted, I found the stabilizer command. But I need more power. Syra turned toward her crew. Redirect all auxiliary power to the main conduit. They obeyed instantly. The crystal core flared brightly and the tremors began to slow. Elias adjusted the final sequence and with a deep hum the system stabilized. The lights returned to normal. The AI's voice spoke again, softer than before. You have done what many could not. The Ark lives again because of you. The hologram turned toward Elias and Syra both. Perhaps the old fears were wrong. Perhaps trust can be born even among those who once hated. Then the hologram faded, leaving silence behind. Syra stood still, breathing slowly. Her silver eyes turned toward Elias. You saved us again, he smiled gently. We saved each other, Commander. She did not reply, but her expression softened. In that quiet moment, she realized something had changed forever. When they returned to the Vareth, the crew greeted them with relief and respect. Syra filed her report to the Valerie Council, but she made a bold choice. For the first time in Valari history, she wrote of a male, not as a threat or a mistake, but as an ally and a hero. In her report, she stated, Elias Carter, human male, acted with intelligence, courage, and compassion. Without him, the Vareth and its crew would have been lost. When the council received the message, there was silence for days. Many Valari leaders doubted her words, but others began to question their old beliefs, whispering that perhaps the time of hate had lasted too long. Elias prepared to leave the Vareth when they finally reached the nearest human station. He stood at the airlock looking around one last time. I guess this is goodbye, Commander. Syra stood across from him, hands behind her back. It does not have to be, she said softly. We could use someone like you. Someone who sees beyond fear, he smiled. And I could use friends like you. But humans still need me out there. She hesitated, then extended her hand, a Valari gesture of deep respect rarely offered to outsiders. Then go with honor, Elias Carter. You have changed more than one life aboard this ship. Elias shook her hand gently. And you've shown me that even across galaxies, people can still learn to understand each other. As he stepped into the transport pod, Syra watched him go. For the first time in her long life, she felt something she had never known before. Hope. The Vareth rose into the stars again, and Syra stood alone on the bridge, looking into the endless dark. Once she had believed males were weak and dangerous, but now she knew that truth was not so simple. Humanity had shown her something powerful, the ability to change, to learn, to care even when it was not expected. And as the stars drifted by, Commander Syra Venar whispered to herself, perhaps after all this time, I was wrong. The ship moved silently through the starlit void, carrying a new story, one of trust, courage, and a bridge between two worlds that had once been divided by fear.